The VCSE Barometer survey. The sector's regular temperature check. Informed by VCSE organisations for VCSE organisations nationwide. Unlock insights for impact.
Great. Right, let's make a start. So yeah, first of all, thank you so much everybody for joining today and for taking the time to, well, first of all, complete the barometer. We'll say a little bit more about that in a moment, but also spending Sarah this afternoon hearing a little bit about the feedback and the research that we've been doing, and also where we're looking to go in the future as well. So I'm Daniel King, I'm Professor of Organisational Studies at Nottingham Trent University, and I head up the Observatory. I'll say a little bit more about that in a moment. But I'll also introduce you to Jack Larkin from Pro Bono. So Jack, do you want to introduce yourself and say a little bit about PBE for those that don't know?
Sure. Hi everyone. Yeah, I'm Jack. I'm a researcher with Pro Bono Economics. We are a charity that predominantly helps other charities to apply economic analysis so that they can measure, understand and communicate their impact. We also have more recently broadened out what we do to focus on research about the charity sector itself, and that led us to this very fruitful partnership that we have with the guys at Nottingham Trent University, working on the barometer. And so I am our organisational lead on sector surveys and the analysis of barometer results.
Great. And I'm Daniel King. So from the National Observatory, so we're based at Nottingham Trent, but we really want to work collaboratively with lots of different people, including Pro Bono and others as well. We're really here to try to help improve the understanding of the state of the voluntary community social enterprise sector, and to produce timely, reliable and relevant data as well that will inform policymakers and funders, but also organisations like yourselves as well, which is one of the reasons behind doing the barometer. And we also want to try to increase the visibility and the understanding of the sector as well. Many of you might know that we were doing work during COVID, sort of trying to pull together some of this evidence, and then we've carried that on. And yeah, just a little bit of background for the barometer as well. About a year ago or so, DCMS, that's Department of Digital, Culture, Media and Sport, came to ourselves, but they came to Jack and others at Pro Bono. They went to NCVO, Directory of Social Change, many other organisations, said, do you have information about how the cost of living crisis is impacting the sector? We need real-time evidence. We want to inform the Treasury. We want to try to do some stuff to champion the sector that way. And sadly, everybody went, no, we don't really have anything. So we got talking to Jack and the team at Pro Bono and said, right, what can we do? And we were independently running barometers and other sort of evidence like this during the COVID period. Said, well, actually, would it not be better if we all come together and work together? And so we've established this quarterly barometer now. We're working at a national level with 14 national organisations. And then we are also working now with some local infrastructure organisations to try to really get the reach and the power of this as well. You may have seen then in the budget, in the spring budget, £100 million was given to the VCSE sector in, I think it's predominantly in England. And DCMS told us the key piece of data and evidence that they used for that was the barometer. So I think really just a massive thank you to everybody for taking up your time, for filling in the barometer, for participating in what we're doing as well. Last wave, we've doubled our response rate, which is fantastic. And really participation is absolutely key to growing and developing this. The bigger the response rate, the higher the quality of the data, the more trusted, the more credible it is as well when it's being presented to different people. But also, and I'll say a little bit more about this, we also want to make this as useful for you as possible. We appreciate this takes time, and some of the questions are quite complicated as well. We're working to try to streamline that and to make things as smooth as possible, but we really sort of value the input of this, and I think it's fair to say there's nothing quite like this across the sector as well. I don't know, Jack, you've got anything else to say on this before we move on?
No, just to say I was shocked and delighted when we got such a huge response this time. I think the key is when we're dealing with survey data, when we have bigger samples, we've got a higher number of respondents, we are able to do so much more. And hopefully what that means is we're able to generate more insight, and more insight that can be communicated and then useful for people in their everyday life. And hopefully we'll touch on some of that later with we've only just started to scratch the surface on that with some of the information around volunteering that some of the guys at NTU did. But I just think the opportunity and the potential for this, when we grow those respondent numbers, means that with greater levels of certainty and greater levels of granularity, we'll be able to start producing insight that hopefully people can start applying to their everyday life within their organizations. And I think to support that would be really helpful and really interesting to get feedback from you guys on what kind of insight or what kind of topics or what kind of data or information you think is lacking in your to help decision making in your organizations or organizational development plans. So yeah, I just think, as I say, greater numbers of responses, greater levels of insight, greater levels of sort of geographical and other types of granularity that we'd really love to be able to present back and feedback and hopefully make it useful for people to apply when they go back to their charities and other organisations.
Yeah, very much so. So we really want to make this as useful as possible for all of you as well. So we're going to present some of the findings in a moment, but also want to have a bit of time, hopefully, for some discussion, and we really want to hear about what would this do to help you as well? How can we take it in that way, so that we and we'll say a little bit more about our plans in a moment. We're also working with some local infrastructure organisations as well to understand some of the things coming through there, so that we hope will be useful. Just to let you know as well then about the sort of the survey for this wave then. So this is the third wave that we've been working on in this new iteration. So been looking a lot about the experiences and expectations and demands. So there's a core set of questions that if those of you that filled it in before may be familiar with. We effectively say, well, what do you think is going on in terms of demand, workforce, volunteer numbers, the financial positions, how what's your capacity to meet the demand, what are your most pressing concerns, and given that we've had lots of the data, and Jack will present some of this in a moment, responses to rising costs and things as well. And then each wave we have a topical set of questions. So these are things like, this wave it was volunteering, the previous wave was around workforce, the first wave we did was around the cost of living crisis as well. So we have some of those, and I'll be presenting some of the volunteering questions, and as Jack says, we've begun to scratch the surface a little bit with some of that, but we'll begin to say a little bit about some of those things as well. So that's the questions, and I'll say a little bit about how we're trying to evolve that as we go through as well. And just to say, this is a little bit about where the response rate, so you may have seen the dashboard. Ben, maybe if you could put in the chat the link to the dashboard, that'd be really helpful as well. But you can begin to see the types of organisations involved in that, where organisations are headquartered, and sort of the size of it. And you'll see in the dashboard there are ways you can filter this, so you can get to a more granular one. So you might think, oh, okay, me personally, I used to run a small therapeutic arts organisation. So part of it, as I was listening to this, if I was in your position, be thinking, okay, what do other organisations like mine, how are they faring right now as well? And with the the beginnings of what we're doing to be able to filter this data, then you can get to some of those types of questions. And again, the more we can grow the barometer in its size, then the more granularity we can get to as well, which I think is a really important part of this process as well. And that's something that we want to do. So and that's just sort of saying broadly where people are located across. We've done it by region at the moment. Again, if we can get larger response rates, we'll be able to get more granular as well. You'll see most regions in England have done pretty well. Just the northeast was relatively low, although they have got a smaller population base. Scotland's got its own survey, so that's why that's a bit smaller, as Northern Ireland and Wales are a little bit smaller as well. So largely within England, we've got quite decent sized response rates by region as well. But obviously, the bigger the response rate, the more granular can we get. Can we get down to location levels, etc., rather than just regional ones? But yeah, we can say more about that at a later point, how we're wanting to develop this. So more importantly, the sort of what the data is telling us right now. So Jack, do you want to just talk us through this next bit?
Yeah, sure. So thank you, Dan. Yeah, so as Dan said, each wave consists of two parts. We have the core part, which are questions which we ask every time. So we repeat them across each wave. And then there are the topical ones, which, as Dan said, we've focused on energy, paid workforce, and then volunteering. I'm going to just quickly whip through what we've observed from the three waves across those core questions. So what I've done here with this chart is just segment the respondent population by organisational size, and we determine organisational size by their self-reported annual income. So large charities, annual income of more than £1 million, medium charities, 100,000 to £1 million, and small charities are any charity with an annual income of less than £100,000. What we've started to see is, although demand remains elevated, so most charities are saying they expect their demand to increase over the next 3 months. And so when we ask these questions, sorry, I should just clarify, when we ask questions on these topics, we say, what was your experience over the last 3 months, and what are your expectations for the next 3 months? On the topic of demand, it is overwhelmingly that organisations are seeing demand increasing, and overwhelmingly organisations are saying we expect demand to continue to increase. But what we are able to observe, and what feels like something that I'm slightly more optimistic about, is that we are seeing fewer and fewer charities saying that they expect their demand to increase by a lot. So now we're sort of shifting. It's still roughly the same amount. So 80% or so of charities are saying we expect demand to grow, but a smaller proportion of them saying actually we expect it to grow by a lot. So what I would say, not something to be hugely optimistic about. Generally, I would say something to feel a little less pessimistic about. And that's what we're seeing here. So across large, medium and small charities, the proportion saying they expect their demand to grow by a lot over the next 3 months has diminished from wave 1 to wave 3. So that was wave 1 in November, wave 3 in May. Wave 2 was February. And I guess sort of on the flip side of that is around, so we ask them about their expectations for demand, but then there's another sort of secondary question around this, which is around, well, how well do you think you're going to be able to meet that demand or service that demand, or so this is really about their expectations for the next 3 months, about how well as an organisation they're going to be able to either catch up or meet with demand. And so I guess as a reflection of what we talked about in the previous slide, we can see there is a slight movement towards a less pessimistic position, let's say. So again, we've split this by large, medium and small charities, and the ones above the x-axis in the sort of darker colours, these are the the percentage of charities who said they expected to be able to meet demand over the next 3 months. And as it says in the title, for the first time ever, we found more than 50% across each of the size categories said that they expected to meet demand over the next 3 months, which is not something to celebrate. And that's a theme I'll probably return to quite a lot during my brief 5 minutes with you. And it's not we're definitely not saying this is a really good development. Again, I think it's all about contextualizing this as saying things are slightly less bad than they were back in November. And if we think about the context in November, we were really at the peak of the costs around the peak of energy cost inflation. There was also a huge amount of uncertainty at that stage about ongoing support with energy costs for both households, but also for organisations. There was no announcement of additional funding for the sector, which came through in the March budget, as Dan mentioned earlier. So there is an indication here, as we can see across wave 1, 2, and 3, that there is a dampening of pessimism, let's say. And if we move on quickly to the next slide.
Just actually, Jack, Alison's put a really great point in. Could this demand also be seasonal, which I think is an interesting reflection. Just quick thing for me before you come back in on that is actually one of the things we really want to do is have this as a long-term barometer that captures it. So in the business sector, people like the Chamber have been running these types of things for 30 years, so they can answer those questions with some degree of certainty because they've got 30 years worth of data around that. Nothing's been done like that in our sector. So one of the reasons of trying to do this on a long-term basis would be to be able to say, right, which bits of this are seasonal or not as well. But also thinking about different subsectors and which ones are being impacted, and we might be able to drill into the data a little bit more around that. I mean, I don't know, Jack, whether you've got any reflections.
I think it's a great question. And I think, unfortunately, the answer has to be we don't know at this stage, but Dan's absolutely right. If we run this survey for 2, 3, 5 years, we'll start to have better insight into that. The one piece of data I would cross-reference this against to draw any sort of hypothesis is, I don't know if any of you are familiar with the data that the Citizens Advice Bureau produce, which is around the number of people that they refer to charities and food banks. And you can definitely identify, they have a good 2 or 3 years worth of data on that. And you can definitely identify seasonal variations in there. And you do tend to see a drop off in the number they refer in the springtime. So around April, May, June, July, and then it picks up again August and in the winter. So there could definitely be a seasonal variation in here. But we have not run this survey long enough to give a definitive answer. I just also noticed another chat.
There's a really good point by Jane, which is saying, about what is demand and is demand good or bad? You know, like you say, if you're running a heritage charity and you want more footfall, then that's a good thing. But maybe other organisations,
absolutely.
I think 100% we would agree. When we were looking at the energy cost stuff, we would say, some places people pay fees, and that's you want to increase that, and others you don't as well. So these are
we do have an evidence point within the survey to cross-reference this against. So one of the questions we ask, and you should be able to dive into the dashboard and look at some of this, is that we ask a question about what your organization's main concerns are. So we ask, what are your top 3 concerns? And we ask a question about, is one of your concerns about increasing demand? But we also ask, is one of your concerns about decreasing demand? And what we find is that I think, off the top of my head, around 2% of respondents say that decreasing demand is a concern for them. So I think you're right, like demand can mean different things, and demand isn't necessarily good or bad. So we do try and have a way of understanding what kind of organizations that are responding to our survey, what demand means to them. And predominantly, organizations are saying that increasing demand is a big concern for them, which leads me to a fairly comfortable conclusion that this is the bad kind of demand that we're seeing. So we flip to the next one. Again, a similar pattern, and there could be various explanatory reasons for this, but this is again, large, medium and small charities, expectations for the next 3 months around your financial position. Above the x-axis are the percentage who think that their financial position will improve, and below the x-axis are the percentage who think their financial position will deteriorate over the next 3 months. And we can certainly see that there's a shrinking proportion who expect their finances to deteriorate, and a slowly growing proportion expecting them to improve. And larger charities generally, and we are seeing this a lot across a number of the different questions and a number of the themes, is larger charities seem to be recovering more quickly, I would say. And again, just going back to my caveat, this isn't a good thing. This is just less of a bad thing, I would always frame this as. And just moving on to, I think, my final slide. And again, I think this demonstrates the large charity experience being a bit of an outlier, is, again, looking forward 3 months, what do you expect to happen with the size of your paid workforce? And again, so it looks like large charities are increasingly more confident that they're going to be able to grow their workforce. And we've talked about this in previous reports, but my hunch is that workforce growth is being driven by demand growth. Charities are constantly trying to keep up. And it certainly seems to me that large charities are able to get back on track or get moving in the right direction a bit quicker than the others. I think that covers my slides. We will have time at the end for questions. So if you've got anything specific you want to ask me or questions, drop something in the chat. But if there's any questions, then I'll take them at the end after Dan's presentation.
Great. Yeah, no, please keep the comments and the suggestions in the chat and other things like that as well. Then, so to say, we have a topical set of questions every time, and I think it's fair to say as well, we're trying to make this, and we appreciate it does take some time to fill in the barometer, but we're trying to make this as easy as possible, but also because we only ask sort of 10-12 questions or so on the topical themes, and there's only so far we can go with this as well. So these sort of indicative findings here, there's probably so much more that could be dug into, and we'll say a little bit about some of the other sources of data that you might want to look at. Things have just come out this week actually, but the volunteering headlines then. So I think if you're running an organization saying, well, I'm finding recruiting volunteers challenging, then you're not alone, I think is a really key thing. Very few, only about 1 in 10, even less than that actually, about 8% of organizations said that recruiting volunteers has been easy. And I think the some of the other surveys out point a little bit to some of the directions of this. A quarter of organizations so they lacked the capacity to recruit volunteers, and I think that really does speak particularly for smaller organizations, and we know how important volunteers can be. We know as well that the cost of living crisis is obviously impacting a lot of the people who would often want to volunteer by taking on other forms of work, having caring responsibilities, having to take on second jobs, or even just volunteering itself costing people money as well. So about a third of organizations saying that has created implications about retention as well. So it'd be really interesting. Again, please put in the chat whether these sort of things resonate with you and what you're trying to do about them as well. So quite a lot of organizations are challenging about doing that, and volunteers feeling under pressure to help the charities keeping delivering as well. So so yeah, so there's some headlines there. So one of the things we asked then is about volunteering recruitment, and it seems as though it's becoming an increasing worry for organisations, particularly smaller organisations as well. We really saw a big jump in the last wave for smaller organisations, and we can have a lot more confidence in this as in the last wave as well. So smaller organisations, by which, as I said previously, we are looking at basis of turnover of under 100,000. 63% of people responding to the survey said that was a major concern. So that's a real jump, and a larger number of the people who completed this last round were smaller organisations as well. So that's certainly something that is an important part there to think through, and why that might be as well. And we asked organisations basically saying, well, did you find it easy or difficult? Now, if you can have a look at these figures, what you can see is those on the left are saying that it's difficult, though the view on the right is when it's easy. You get a net balance, which is effectively where you take the difficult response minus the easy one, and you can see whether it's overall, how is it feeling? So yeah, very much feeling around on organisations saying that they are finding it difficult to recruit volunteers. And as a further piece of evidence there, about 1 in 5 organisations saying that the cost of living has made volunteering recruitment more difficult as well. And actually, organisational size doesn't seem to have that much bearing on that. That seems to be across the piece. Organisations are saying that is a challenge as well. And then Jack, if you want to jump, if there's anything in the chat in particular that's relevant that we wanted to talk through around this, or we could come back to some of these.
Charlie's question around it's basically are the people who are likely to respond, does the subject matter or their particular position affect the results? I'd say absolutely. The method for recruitment for this survey is means that because it's open to anybody to reply to, you're likely to get people who respond who are more inclined to give a certain answer or a certain type of perspective. And I think there's something over the long term that we need to think about as a group, as a team, about how we make the sample more representative and less, I guess, at risk of being skewed by that exact point.
The other thing I think just to say on that is, whilst we're presenting the exact numbers now, ultimately this is about the direction of travel. So this isn't necessarily about a percentage saying this is good or bad, but this is about where does it go. And this is, again, if we keep this going over time, if we run this next year, then where is it going? How does it compare to what it was before is a really important part of this as well. So having that sort of direction of travel piece is going to be a really important point. But yeah, I think we want to be open and transparent about this type of data, what it can do, but also what it can't do as well. And I think they're really good points on that. I'm going to move on unless there's any question or any points in the chat that are particularly pertinent to these slides then, Jack. But if not, then you're on mute as well.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I certainly agree. There's definitely a COVID effect in volunteering participation. We've seen it in our survey. It's definitely been picked up through the other big volunteering surveys. So the Community Life Survey and NCVO's Time Well Spent. I think both of this certainly reflects what we're seeing is that COVID has had a really, really negative impact on volunteering participation.
Yeah, that's great. And yeah, I mean, we've done a little bit, and again, you can only read so much into these just because of the sample sizes, but we've looked a little bit by region, which I thought was quite interesting. I wouldn't particularly put so much store by Scotland because it's a very small response rate there, but certainly, you look at places like London, and there is an interesting trend there by region. Don't want to bear too much on that. What we might want to do as well over time is to look at whether this is more an urban rural thing or other things like that as well. So that gives you just something. So this is just very indicative. We haven't reported this just because we thought it was just an interesting thing there to reflect about whether different regions have got different experiences of this. One of the things, again, which we just looking at and just to test with you really as a sense taking is, well, what are some of the challenges there? And one of the biggest barriers to recruitment has been low responses to adverts. So you can see there around some of the challenges there that when people are saying what are the barriers to recruitment is advert response to adverts, whether people are quite suitable for the roles, capacity of organisations to be able to recruit as well. And then cost of living does come into that, and the financial resources as well. So you can only see some interesting questions and ideas around what some of those challenges might be, and some of the reflections there of what people are finding when they're going through that. And some interesting things again, just getting a sense of some of the data here about the different recruitment methods and the responses to different types as well around this, and what the sort of the possibilities or the difficulties of that are. So charities reported lower response rate for paid marketing and traditional media. Some are employing volunteer managers, looking to collaborate with different charities, to organise in-person events. They seem to be achieving higher response rates. Now, again, this is only indicative by what the sort of things people are saying, but it does present some interesting ideas about, well, okay, what can be done? I know some places that I've been doing some work with, what they're trying to do is actually within certain areas, sharing resources and ideas, and the local CVS really being involved as a real hub to try to connect organisations together, and maybe trying to promote what does volunteering and what can you get out of it as well. Again, this might be a post-COVID thing, trying to get people to connect back into volunteering as well. But actually lots of organisations are really struggling to try to recruit, and maybe size only has some sort of bearing on this as well. So that's something that we can see. You can see lots of organisations there finding it difficult. So when we look at by size, larger organisations say, you know, the number of saying it's difficult is almost the same. So you can see really size doesn't seem to be so much an issue on this particular one. One of the big things I think that's quite interesting with this is, again, this is an organisational perspective, is that retention seems to be implicated by increases in people having to take on extra work, but also extra caring responsibilities as well. So, and you've got some quotes here. So somebody involved in a smaller charity say that the cost of living crisis has limited the ability of volunteers to free up their time. Some people are doing second jobs, trying to earn a living. People's priorities maybe have changed, losing volunteers, spending time with the family and things like that as well. So there's some interesting things going on there. So there's definitely barriers that we're seeing across the piece there. And those first three things about people having work responsibilities and caring responsibilities, and the cost of living being sort of the top three reasons that organisations are saying are having negative impacts across the piece there. And then charities offering more benefits. So this is a bit experimental. So we are sort of examining this a little bit more detail. So this, don't read too much into this, but we wanted to just lay this out, that organisations that offer a larger number of benefits do seem to have a little bit better outcomes than those that don't for volunteers as well. So that's something that's just a bit, something that we're experimenting a little bit with in terms of the data. So there's some interesting things there about what are you trying, what's working, what isn't working, how does that work as well. Big thing there though about well-being, and I think it's really interesting that overall there's a real mixed picture. Some organisations are saying that well-being for their volunteers has declined, and others are saying that it's improved. But overall, if you take a net balance, then this would be sort of it's more on the worsening stage, and we know obviously then increasingly obviously lots of financial and other pressures impacting people as well. Maybe we'll come back, Ben. There's a question about the benefits being offered to volunteers as well. Oh, Jack's already answered the question in the chat So that's great. That's the sort of questions that are in the question set as well. So real challenges, and I think we saw in COVID when people were remote as well, massive lots of debate about well-being, and organisations trying to do a lot to support their volunteers through times when the social connections weren't there as well. So it'd be very interesting to see what you think of that. And I'll say a little bit more in a moment about where we're taking the survey as well, but you could definitely see well-being of volunteers, and we saw that as well recently around staff. So that's just some of the headlines. There's clearly more that we can do with the evidence around this. I don't know, actually, before we get into that, were there any other questions in the chat that, or any points in the chat that it's worth sharing about as well?
I'd just quickly to say, Rachel's question about, was it Rachel? Who asked about
the number of benefit, or about the benefits?
Oh no, it was Alison Smith. Sorry, I've got myself mixed up there. So Alison asked if we can cut the data, whether we cut the data by charitable objective. We haven't in these ones, but the dashboard, which is linked, which Ben has dropped the link in for, you can definitely do that filtering. I can see Ben's already answered that question. Sorry, Ben, I didn't spot that.
Yeah, so you can on the dashboard, and maybe I'll screen share the dashboard briefly as well, because we want that as a tool that we can use. And again, there are ways we're looking to try to improve that, and we'd love to have your views on that as well then. So just give you another couple of headlines about where we're going and what we're doing as well then. So the next wave is going to be open between the 13th and the 27th of September. So we'll carry on with the core questions, which are the types of things that Jack's presented to you. And then we've got our topical guide, which, from what we're hearing around lots of different places, is the topic about well-being. And we know how important and significant that is, around volunteer well-being and staff well-being as well. And we're developing up some question sets around that. Again, if you've got particular topics you think are important for us to consider on that, then we are going, please put things into the chat as well, because we are in a process of consultation. We again want to make that as useful as possible to people. And then we're working with some local infrastructure organisations, probably 2 or 3 in the next wave, to get a few topical local questions that are relevant as well, that are not just about national perspective, but about local perspectives, and all of that. One thing we want to just say is, we're incredibly grateful for everybody who's completed this, but we really want to improve the barometer. We know that it can be at times quite long, and some bits you end up repeating some questions as well. So we're trying to change the way, and over the next few months we're going to be trying to change that. One of our key aims is to not make it extractive. So fill this in and you get nothing back. So we've had some money via the Lloyds Bank Foundation, have given us some resources, and I'm sure some of you have worked with the work that Public Perspectives have done, which is really trying to work out, okay, what's in it for you? What can you get back? And so we are trying to explore, how can we get this data back to you in a way that's useful? Very simply, lots of people have asked us, well, can we have our answers to the questions so we can present those back to our boards and others? And that's certainly something we're working on, but we want to do better than that. We would like to, and this may take us a little while, but get it so you can see your responses back in relation to what other people have responded as well, and make that a useful thing. We want to develop up the barometer dashboard as well, so you can get insights that are relevant to you. For those of you that are registered charities or registered companies, and you've put your company or your charity number in as well, then we are looking to draw on that data so we can reduce the information that we require from you each time, but we can also get a deeper understanding of that, so we can effectively make the data not only less burdensome for you, but actually more beneficial as well. And we're developing that up over time as well. So again, more than happy to get ideas and suggestions and things of how we can make this better, because ultimately, we've had about 3,000-4,000 organisations have responded to this. What we would ideally want to do is make this so that actually completing the barometer, getting information back, helps you make better decisions within your organisation, as well as doing things like helping DCMS convince the Treasury to give the charity sector more money as well. You might, just in case you haven't been aware, that the Time Well Spent national survey, which is looking at volunteers, has just come out. I think it came out on Wednesday, if memory serves me correct as well. So that might be another source of information and ideas for you as well. So, I mean, that's in terms of what we want to present, everything that we did. I might just share with you the dashboard in a moment, but there are our contact details and things. So we'd love to have any other thoughts and suggestions on that. There are email addresses and things along those lines.
See where you are in the big picture. Stay ahead of the curve. Join a community of changemakers. Amplify your voice. Drive collaboration and innovation. Sign up for the survey. Have your say. And influence action where it counts. For you. Your input matters.